Welcome to Batchademia, a podcast so educational two professors could be hosting it. Hi, I'm Dr. Danielle Dick-McGue, and joining me is Dr. Bill Henneman. Welcome to Batchademia. Today we have a special guest, UNI alum and human extraordinaire, Katie Grassi. So Katie was at UNI from 2010 to 2015. She was so awesome in my classes, but she has grown up to be even more awesome. So tell us a little bit about your life, Katie. What should we know about you?
Yeah, I currently, am a life coach. I just quit my full-time 8 to 5 to pursue that and even dive down that rabbit hole and path a little bit further with energy work and healing and on-hand, off-hand work in general. So that's what I do. That's what I love to do, and pumped to be here. I'm super, super excited about this.
So I would want Katie to be my life coach. If I wanted to like connect with you so that you could like coach me through life, how would I do that?
The best way is probably through Instagram. That has become like this virtual business platform, at Coached by KG. I do a little adventuring too. You can find me on Instagram as well at Les Travel, LEZTRVL, where I am renovating an RV to full-time and travel, both relating back to my why of tomorrow's not promised. So how do you utilize every day, and how do you transition through all these life transitions and grow into a better version of yourself and shed the old versions to really step into your power and adventure and live life, make memories, live it to the fullest. So it all kind of comes full circle, but for sure Instagram is like the main platform to find me.
And what better way to live a full life than to watch The Bachelorette and get to talk about it on this podcast?
Yes.
Yes.
How are you doing today, Bill?
I'm great. I'm way good.
Way good. So, August is a weird month, Bill and I being academics, it's kind of like this melancholy month. Sometimes I say it's like a really long Sunday night, but it's also a lovely fresh start. So this year I get to bring my kiddo Harper to kindergarten for the first time. And so we're really trying to pump them up about the start of the school year and start some back to school traditions. And so I wanted to know from you all, what are some of your like favorite back to school traditions that either you had when you were growing up or you created for yourself maybe in college?
I think the classic was the back to school shopping. Like a huge thing was a new backpack and a new pair of shoes. That was like the staple. I am such an organized, like have to have all the folders and color coordinated. And I've noticed that in my real life, if I do not have color coded, like this client file or this, like even my finances, I'm lost. Like I need that structure in my life. And I almost, even as an adult, kind of have this going back to school thing where I get reorganized, reset with my finances. And I still do that. With my niece and nephew, we've taken that classic, like, what do you want to be? And like that picture with the board you fill out. And so that's been kind of fun to watch my niece and nephew do as they've started school and been now in like, will be kindergarten and second grade, I think.
Awesome. I love that. What about you, Bill?
I don't know if I have any. I eat a taco pizza at the end of every semester. I get like
so
at the
you
end.
mark the end.
Yep. Once I'm done grading finals, when I was done with my finals in college, like I would go get a taco pizza from somewhere and drink Diet Mountain Dew. And during finals, I would drink Diet Mountain Dew and eat peanut M&Ms. And I've kicked the Diet Mountain Dew habit, except for now, this is how you know you become middle-aged. We're not sponsored by Diet Mountain Dew. I'm drinking caffeine-free Diet Mountain Dew. So nothing of use to me. I'm probably rotting myself from inside, but.
But what about Little Bill? Did Little Bill have any back to school traditions?
I can't, I'm sure my mom, you've met Danelle. You were hugged by Danelle. Everyone gets hugged by Danelle. I'm sure she had back to school traditions. We had pictures. We always had the new backpack. But I can't think of anything else. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved back to school shopping. We're gonna do the little like kindergarten interview, like first day, last day interview with our kids. I was trying to think of some of mine now. Like I have this ritual and I kind of do it a few times a year, but at the start where I create my ideal week. It's like I print out like actually I have one right here. Why not? So if you're watching, you can see this, but I like print out a week and then I color code of what my ideal week would be if like life went right. And of course, like that never actually works, but it's like a fun way for me to feel in control.
I like it.
Yeah.
I love that.
So yay for fresh starts. Speaking of fresh starts, gosh, I'm so good at this transition thing.
And it's
Katie might need a fresh start after this episode this week. This episode was simultaneously boring and a lot. I don't know if you agree.
I felt like it was nothing until the last hour, and then it was a lot. Yeah, but it's like the first two guys were like, kind of exactly what you'd expected, except for his, not to get ahead of us, but except for Blake's sister. I really appreciated Blake's sister. Yeah, saying everything that America had been thinking for the last like 3 iterations of The Bachelorette, where it's like first you loved so and so, and then you loved so.
Well, so let's jump into Blake. So
okay,
it's right away with Blake's hometown. He takes quote unquote her to Canada. They go to a cabin. There's like lots of, what is it called? Taxidermy. They take shots of maple syrup. They ride a moose, which I'm not sure that's really what Canadians do. Like,
wait. Pause. So Kim, co-host Kim, and my lovely wife Elaine both confirmed that they had dated a Canadian and they made them drink maple syrup on their first date. Elaine said that like the guy sat down and poured her like a mug of it and then like was like, now drink it. And she took a sip and he's like, no, drink the whole thing. And Kim said the same thing happened to her. So apparently this drinking maple syrup thing is not, because, I think I was with you. Like most of the stuff is like really bad stereotypes, but yeah. And Elaine has been telling the story since we started dating. So it's like, and it's been consistent. It's a full glass. First date, the guy stares at her and like makes her drink the whole thing. So
I don't know that I could. Like that is so rich, and like pure maple syrup is like it's a different kind of like that's a lot. Yeah.
I'll keep with it on my pancakes. They also play
transition. Boom. Good job, Danielle.
Oh, we're professionals over here at Badgademia. So I kind of felt like Blake was trying too hard. Like he was like being really bro-y, like more than like normal. I felt like he's sort of like, I like used to bartend. I played darts every 5 weeks. And it was like, I don't know, there's like nothing necessarily wrong with it, but it just like felt really weird to me. Did you all feel it at all? Like, what are your thoughts on Blake, Katie?
I feel like I actually watched a few of the previous seasons with him in it too, and I never liked him from the first impression on the first time he was on. I don't know why, but it just felt like a presentation more than it felt like he was really being himself. And then I was also confused, like, why are you finding out these things that he's presenting as really important things all of a sudden, like way into dating? I'm like, if this was important, would you have stated that a long time ago? But it felt like, here's a token, and here's my Boy Scout badge for this, and here's my Boy Scout badge for that. I don't know, I didn't get that vibe.
He's had ample time because he's been on like 17 seasons at this point.
Well, I think that for me too, it felt like he was sort of highlighting things that you would like highlight if you were like in your early 20s maybe, but like if you're like 29, 30, ready to get married, you know, like I'm like, I just don't know if you're getting ready to settle down if the thing that you sell yourself on is like, I shoot darts. Like, I don't know. It
I
just,
think the relevance was a little lacking for me, in especially what was supposed to be this really solidifying date and bringing in a lot more like intimacy. What feels like you're meeting your hometowns, like that is very intimate. And maybe that is what his experience was, is like very bro-y. I don't know, but it felt surface level when it should have been much deeper, in my opinion.
so of course, so Greg gets like, he ends up overseeing some of their interactions, and this really shakes Greg. I guess thoughts about that at this point.
And by shakes, you mean he leans over the banister with his mopey face and just like.
I feel like I witnessed him through the entire episode, except for his date. And I'm jumping a little bit, but in general, just very like puppy dog. Like, if I don't get my way, then I'm going to mope. And I cannot help but find it ironic that he happened to be able to be watching this date unfold. And
well, I think this is one of the things that's like a little bit different in COVID-y bachelor world, right? So normally at this point, they really are in their hometowns. The guys aren't even living together. And I felt like this on both Claire and Tayshia's season, that having to stay living with the guys or the girls, like, you know, while your relationships start to get really serious, is having a different effect on how people are interacting on the show.
Yeah, because it's not totally uncommon for people to date, you know, in your first few dates, to date multiple people, right? Like, you may go out on a date with one person and you kind of know the person might be going on other dates, but there's definitely, for most people and most romantic configurations, a point where it's like, okay, we are exclusive. If you do anything outside of this, it's now considered, you know, some type of affront to our relationship. And I feel like for them, that seems to be right around the time they do the hometowns. Like, that seems when it really starts to get most people. There's this like intimacy type thing that gets thrown into it.
I think it also makes it really challenging. And it's probably having studied some production too, like witnessing how they choose to show the story and tell it, but also like how it's hometowns. But it would be really challenging to be in this container where you're trying to find love and get to not even really experience their hometown. Right. And it's like, hey, I'll see you 100 yards away, but we're in hometowns tonight. And
well, how do you talk about like potentially relocating your life to another place that you've never been, but you know, like,
well, and I don't know,
on a desert resort for the last 6 or 8 or weeks or whatever, 2 months, you know.
Right. And I don't know if this is to Katie's credit or Katie's detriment, but she has given no concrete answer one way or another when they're like, are you going to move? You know, would you move here? And she's like, anything's on the table. And it's like, so from one end, like our Katie said, you know, if we were on The Bachelor, Katie G, like Katie G said, as opposed to Katie T, because adults use their last letter. You have a dog behind you. Introduce
He snores.
What's
I have to
what's
shake
their
him.
name?
That's
Jacob?
Briggs.
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 Oh.
Anytime I get on a recording, he starts to snore. So if you hear him, that's like his jam. And then Cooper grabs a toy that usually squeaks. Like, it is like clockwork, I swear. So I'm just prefacing that for the rest of the time.
That's fine. So anyways, she hasn't seen their hometowns, which is a big thing. But also, you have to know a little bit. Would you move? You know, like, there has to be a, like, would I relocate for somebody? And I feel like she's not giving any indication one way or another.
Yeah, because they're all 4, I guess, in completely different areas of the whole country. I mean,
Yeah.
vastly different.
Well, and she even said she would move for Michael, and he lives in like Sandusky, Ohio or something like that. And she's like, I could. It's like, oh, you'll move anywhere or nowhere. You haven't told us yet.
Yeah.
North Dakota.
It's so interesting. So
State phone pole's a tree. State tree's a phone pole. I said the wrong way. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
I don't know how to segue from phone pole to family.
I know I'm really throwing you some curveballs today.
You're giving me
Oh, wait. North Dakota's right up by Canada, which is where Blake's family lives.
So there we go. They meet Blake's family. That was well done, Bill.
Thank you. I learned from the best.
Okay, so let's talk about Blake's sister, because really that's the most important family member in this interaction. She calls him on his stuff.
She called a spade for sure.
Yeah. She really should be on The Bachelor or be the Bachelorette. Like, she's more discerning than he could ever be, and I appreciate that about her. So
this is really interesting. Katie, I think, tweeted, if you think that, like, she's telling it how it is, wait till the season finale. And I thought that was like such an interesting clue to have.
Yes, I thought so too. I hope she fights someone, and my money's on her. I'm going straight to like sportbooks.com and putting money on Blake's sister in whatever fight versus Blake versus Evander Holyfield. She looks like she could beat somebody down.
I thought his mom was also very aggressive in the way that she was like, I need you to tell me, like, almost demanding information of Katie about like where their relationship stands, what her intentions are. And across like that whole span of time, I don't know how long the hometowns take, 3 days or whatever. That would be a lot to process, and having all these families like really wanting your attention, like not even attention, but wanting your like information, wanting your decision.
So I have a question. Do you think all the parents do that and they've just edited it out over the years unless it's been useful? And this was like they were trying to set it up?
I felt a slight production in the way that the conversation in almost all three of them were very much about the timeline. Like, it is a specific time frame to which all of this takes place. And that is a lot of pressure to then get to this point of saying, I love you, and that being a big thing. So the conversation around saying, I love you, needing to state that to almost state dominance and like mark your territory and see how Katie reacts. It felt very competitive in that sense. In seasons past where I didn't feel the competition in this much of a family oriented way, like almost like teams.
I think that the meetings with the family always feel a little bit staged, right? Like okay, can I pull you aside for a bit and we can talk? Like, always just, feels like very much like they said, okay, so you're gonna say this now. We're gonna get this on film. But I also do think a lot of the concerns that parents and family members bring up seem like reasonable, like, and expected concerns. I do think this like obsession that all the families seem to be curious about whether or not they'd say it, I love you, hadn't seemed like a theme. Like, it might be like, well, how do you feel about the other guys? How's that play out? Are common questions, but I thought that it was a little bit more pointed around this like I love you issue. So I kind of wonder how much of that was maybe scripted.
I wonder. Go ahead, Katie.
I was just going to say, it felt like it almost didn't feel as much of how they felt, but if they had said it. And if I was one of those guys, I would feel the pressure from my family also that I felt was partially created, but also real. Like, have you expressed that? And then you have to wonder, because I find The Bachelor or Bachelorette, any of them, fascinating in a way that how do you center and ground yourself in authenticity amidst like this whole show, and also the show trying to present it in an authentic way. I mean, there's this constant paradox happening the whole time of how it all plays out.
Yeah, definitely. What were you gonna say, Bill?
I forgot. It wasn't as good as what Katie just said, so we can move on.
Yeah.
It might have been a fart joke. I don't know. It was not going to be very highbrow. That's for dang sure.
So, Blake does tell his mom that he's ready to propose. He tells her that he needs to tell Katie that he loves her. I have sort of this question about gendered expectations too, right? I kind of wonder if, for example, this idea that guys aren't going to express themselves, like, or say or share how they feel is kind of a stereotype. So it seems like kind of interesting. I wonder if the gender roles were reversed, for example, if you would have, if you would question whether or not a woman had expressed her feelings, so I don't know, just something I was sort of thinking about.
I feel like sometimes moms play that role for men, right? And then their spouses do, if they're in a hetero relationship, that they become this emotional, like, true north for them. It's like, you need to tell them how they feel. And it's like they kind of stunt their emotional growth, because then it's like they go to mom and like, now or later, or, and I felt like that's what you were seeing with Blake, was this like, his mom's like, now's the time, honey. And then he like was like, okay, now and he felt a lot of pressure.
So then they go to say okay, sorry. They like go to say goodbye, and he kind of like, he doesn't do it.
I felt the time frame pressure a lot with Blake's goodbye, in that looking back on how it played out, I don't know that he truly was at a point where he wanted to say it. Obviously he would have said it if he said it, or he wouldn't have if he wouldn't have, but their goodbye also felt more awkward compared to Justin's even.
Yeah.
And it feeling less natural and super forced. But also I have to kind of call out Blake of how many times, like, this is the one, I'm going to say it. This is the one, I'm going to say it. And like, America is thinking the same thing. How many times are you going to cry wolf before you actually, like, where you feel ready or you're at that point? And what is that point? Like, I think that was something hard to comprehend too, is such a theme of reaching this point of which you would confess your love, which, do we even really know what that looks like? There is no playbook that says like, step 22, tell them you love them. And they also chose like, I'm falling in love with you. Right. But I feel like falling in love is the action of falling. Aren't they doing that this whole time anyway? Instead of like, I am in love with you. Like, that's a declaration, not this action of falling.
Yeah.
I think we talked about it last week. The idea of like, I'm in love is kind of a weird idea too, because it's like, it's not like you are in stasis in love your whole life when you marry somebody, right? There's this like research that there's an ebb and a flow, and then there's the 3 different types that go into love. And it's like, at any point, it's like an amoeba, one's pulled one way, commitment, passion, and intimacy are always kind of shifting. And so just to say like, I am in love with this person, really what you're saying is, I am committed to you now. As opposed to, I am having these feelings that kind of make up love.
Yeah.
Shit, that was
good. That was
wow. Yeah.
Wow. Hold on, let me take notes.
That was way better than the joke I was going to make. Wow. I think Blake needs to work on Blake. That was before I started that long professor statement. I feel like Blake doesn't really know what love looks like for him. And I feel like that's what you were seeing there, is that it's hard for him to say I love you when he doesn't really know what it means, other than his mom's telling him it's the time now, Blake.
Yeah.
So do we think that Justin is further along than Blake? So Justin's hometown is next, and it begins with us learning that his parents will not be coming to hometowns because they just think this whole scenario is wacky.
Which was a gift, because then we get to meet Herb and Tommy.
Oh, yes. And Herb and Tommy are wonderful.
Yes.
So they go to Baltimore, they ride a carriage and look at graffiti. She talks about what a great kisser he is. Like, that is the one thing I know about Justin, is that apparently he is a great kisser. So he tells her that his parents aren't coming. I think we did a poll on this
We
on
did.
Twitter, right?
About 100 people said he should tell the truth, which I would fall on the side he did not tell the truth. He said they could not come, as opposed to they basically said we are not coming. And so about 92% said tell the truth, about 6%, or no, about 3% said tell a lie, and then about 3% said create a distraction, which I feel like is actually better than lying in some ways. So
I felt
Yeah.
like that was a choice that was made too, and that they couldn't make it. It's not that they couldn't make it, they
Right.
chose not to come. And I
Right.
felt that that was very inaccurately stated, and my opinion should have been expressed. Also, because I think that for the production's sake, they skate around, and this is probably jumping ahead too, but one of Greg's grievances with the whole where he's at is like the process, like this incubator, like fall in love thing. And it's, I don't know, you know, if there could be someone in Bachelor World Nation that could say this is not to be talked about, where they couldn't state like, because of the production of the show, that was in direct conflict to the parents wanting or being voluntary, like coming to be a part of it, that maybe even stating that would be in conflict to the show itself and kind of what they're trying to present.
I just think that they missed an opportunity to have a discussion about how they would handle his family if he was the one at the end, you know, like,
yeah.
um,
I wonder, there was a part of me that kind of wondered if possibly he was just trying to protect Katie. So like maybe he really thinks, you know, we may get married, and it's like, what I don't want is for her to start off on the foot with my parents, that they were like, I'm not coming to meet you, which I don't think that lying is the best way to start out, but I do understand the kind of like, maybe if we can not deal with this right now, which I think is actually a really useful relationship strategy, is knowing when is the time to have the fight and when is the time to just be like, just let it go.
Creative avoidance.
Yeah, there'll be plenty of fights moving down the road. Like, let's just not have this one today.
so let's talk about Herb and Tommy. What was so wonderful about them? What did you love them? What did they ask the good questions?
I appreciated that he has two guy friends that are willing to discuss emotional things with him, not around playing golf, right? Like they sat face to face, and Herb challenged him on several things, and he thought about it, and then they didn't like get up and like, so how about the Ravens this year? Like it was a very like mature, like adult conversation, and I like that.
I sometimes feel like you can learn a lot about a person by their friends too. You know, that like, you're like, in some ways, like your family, you don't always have a choice. You know, like that's who you're stuck with. But like you have a choice in who your friends are. And so seeing who people choose as their friends, I do think can kind of provide you some insight into that person.
I think that that's a part that I hadn't seen on other or seasons, I guess, where they put so much pressure or importance on the family, which I totally get. When you think about a wedding, though, the family is involved, but you stand with your friends, and you know that being a huge support. And almost, I would love to see a shift where there's maybe like a hometown and like there's two nights or the same night where it's family and friends, or a friend night because of that reason. And I think it's very telling. You can be anyone to one person, but who you choose to associate with, and even that, you know, the theory of theory, I don't know, but 5 people you surround yourself with are a good synopsis of who you are. That was a cool part and an insight, and huge kudos for them showing male emotional representation. Like, I thought that that was a great capacity to which they held that conversation. And were very expressive in it without like, haha, like, thanks, bro, or thanks, dude, like, really appreciate you. I didn't feel any of that.
I'm not sure Tommy was as good of a friend. Like, I have this theory that Tommy just like works with him, and he was like, Herb, and who else? This guy I work with, he's white, tall, thin, Taylor, Tommy, get Tommy. And then Tommy's like looking through a binder on the plane that's like, Justin dates people for a short amount of time. And it's like, because I felt like when he was talking, he was kind of echoing those. He's like, and you know, he doesn't open up very often to, yeah, that was my thought.
Well, so speaking of emotionally expressive men, the final hometown is with Greg. It begins with them on a tandem bike. She talks about, you know, how much fun they have together, which was kind of like a funny thing, because I do think that they have a lot of fun together, and he is really playful, but we see puppy dog Greg, we see gloomy Greg, right? So often that like it's kind of this funny thing for her to like describe him as this like really fun person. But they do tend to have fun together. So then they end up playing a game of basketball, and he chooses to have them do this because this is a way that he oftentimes connected with his dad, and she had shared what she did with his dad with him on his one-on-one, so he wanted to, and I thought that was super thoughtful. And then of course, like, he makes it rain again. I have to say, I sort of feel like the production crew has just like a few tricks to do during like COVID time, and they keep just like, they're like, can we do this the next episode? Sure, people loved it, we'll go for it.
Rains in New Jersey. Yep.
Yeah, that was funny. I thought that was like a funny little, does it rain in New Jersey? Sometimes.
It's like, to my knowledge, it rains everywhere in the world, even in the desert sometimes.
So nothing really surprising.
So I do want to point out, my mother-in-law lived in Albuquerque for a long time. That water, like, they conserve water there. I am worried that they are making it rain so often. Like, they are running up. Water is not cheap there. Like, it's high desert. I mean, like, I have a feeling the city of Albuquerque showed up to the hotel and was like, what the hell? Like, turn off your sprinklers.
Yes, this is a call for the Bachelor franchise to take into concern environmental
needs,
sustainability.
Serve your damn water.
Yeah.
I thought a couple things too, when you said like how fun he was. I feel like it was stated over and over and over how happy he was. And I have been through a lot of loss, and losing someone that you then use a romantic partner to fill a void with is not necessarily a good thing. And so I just noted that as like, is this good? Like, is your happiness sustainable, or is it like a fill?
Yeah.
Which led into the basketball. I was actually really choked up about that. I stopped fishing when my dad got sick and then passed away. I didn't fish for 7 years. And with my last relationship, that was something I did with her brother-in-law, was to go fishing for the first time. And so I really do feel like he poured his whole freaking heart out in that date. And like, this is what I have. This is who I am, or where I'm at right now. And just watching all of that play out, as we'll talk about, I think was really difficult to watch. And like, I don't know if she was holding back because of not being able to state her feelings, but I also feel like previous Bachelor and Bachelorettes, like, this is what I'm stating. I choose so-and-so like 4 episodes before they're supposed to, or whatever. So I'm like, are there rules, or are there not rules, or are there rules so you break the rules? I'm confused here.
I think there's rules so you break them. They love it when people break the rules. So then they
never been done on Bachelor Nation.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Well, and I mean, I do think I had read somewhere at some point that they kind of discourage them from like saying I love you to someone for like, but it seems like that was like her personal choice, and that you do have examples of in past seasons where people have said, I love you. I mean, I do think, Katie, one thing that you're really pointing out is there was an intimacy and sort of a level of vulnerability that you saw on their date that just like wasn't quite as present on Justin or Blake's. And yeah, so then they meet Katie's family and they show this video, and
Greg's family.
Oh, sorry, what did it say?
You said Katie, and I was like, did I not pay attention?
Oh no, no, sorry.
All right, no, that was me checking that I hadn't like been like 6 drinks in and like.
No. So they meet Greg's family. Katie meets Greg's family. They show this video, and Greg gets really emotional. He cries, and then his family, you know, asks Katie about her feelings, and I really felt like she pretty much told them, maybe more than I've seen in past seasons, that she's like, I'm going to choose him, without telling them
right
that she's going to choose, you know, like, I don't know that I've heard someone say where they're ranked before.
Right.
And haven't shown it for sure. They haven't shown it if they have.
Yeah. Cause I think that they want to keep people on edge and like kind of guessing. And I don't remember what season this was, but it was like total curveball. Like, I'm going home, or I'm ending the show now and I'm going to be with this person. I don't remember who's
the guy who jumped the fence and recently came out. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Colton.
It felt kind of like that again, but in a way that Katie was like, okay, there's like a production, like I can't break contract, without saying like, I can't break contract, we're on camera right now. And like stating, we're in this for the long haul. Like, I'm gonna, like, Mom, I'm talking to you, Mom, you're not my mom, but you're gonna be my, like, you know, it just felt so like so obvious. And then Greg just goes off on like this little pity freaking party about not getting told. You know, he needed it point blank stated to him what Katie was beating around the bush, or felt like. And I'm like, face palm,
really goes south. And it is, I thought, a very realistic, although unfortunate, example of like people just really missing the boat on.
Yeah, they get in their own ego, and like it almost was like he wasn't listening anymore. And even when she was trying to talk, he was just not okay. But what about like just so like pointed and questioning her and blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, you're not listening.
And that night, I wondered if he had been drinking, because I have been in those arguments before where I've been drinking, and it's like I am not. I am below the reasoning bar, right? Like you just, but then it's like, so when I was watching it, I was like, okay, I feel like they're having 2 different arguments right now. They will probably wake up. If this was a normal argument in a normal relationship, it would probably span 3 days. And I've talked about this on here, but you know, that's where one of the ways where the Bachelorette is really different than real life, right? Because you have this forced decision point, where in regular life, it's like, you don't talk to each other for a week, then you start to feel bad. They do, you come back, you make up, and I felt like, so that night I was like, okay, you know, they'll make up. And then when he came back in, it's like, I felt like they were having a good argument as far as what they were saying. Like, I felt like he was expressing himself well, and she was apologizing and trying to explain her position. And it just was not working. Like, he had no interest. Yeah.
I feel a little bit the opposite. I feel like right at first, he was not actually stating, like, he wasn't finding the right words to say, I don't need a rose. I don't need to be told I'm in this competition. Like, what are we outside of this show? And it wasn't until he really said it that way. And I feel like Katie missed an opportunity to even just clue him in. She didn't have to say, I love you, or I'm falling in love. She could have just said, Greg, I have serious feelings for you, and I don't want you to go anywhere. It could have been that freaking simple, that she would have stated one thing. And honestly, this might be maybe too fairy tale, but when she kind of followed him, and I couldn't tell with his eye contact if it was staged or not for this whole debacle to unfold, but she followed him and was kind of like kneeling by him. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's just going to propose. We're going to screw all gender roles. This is going to be a never actually seen on Bachelor Nation. And she's going to propose to him right now and end the show. Like, and then it went south again. I'm like, Katie, you didn't actually say any of your feelings. And are you just biting your tongue because of the show and like having it to play out until the season finale next week? But now you want to go home? I'm still confused. I'm confused. Greg, I'm with you. I'm confused.
I always, go ahead.
I want to kind of pull us back and actually just describe for our listeners and to just make sure we're on the same page, like what kind of happened. I want to kind of like break it down just a little bit. So, so the night before, when things start to go south, they just talk to the family and they're having this really heartfelt conversation, and Greg expresses his love for Katie. And I think says like that, like she feels like a void or a hole in his heart or something like that. And I don't really remember exactly how she responds.
She said, I love looking at you.
And then she says, you seem sad. Okay. And that's the turning point. When she says, you seem sad, things start to shift.
I think the nonverbal for the people that weren't, or just to recap, what I visually saw was him asking for a return of expressed emotions without asking for it. Like he didn't actually ask. And Katie, I don't know if she had stated to this point if she had told them, I'm not saying I love you. And she had only said that to the family, or if she'd said that to the guys. But he was kind of assumptively asking for some sort of response of emotion, and her lack of and just silence, and then kind of trying to change the subject, then shifted his nonverbals where I want an answer. You didn't give me one. I feel like I didn't get the validation I was wanting. And then she says, you seem sad.
And I felt like, so if I can add one thing, I went back and watched it a couple times. I think he really changed when he said, you fill this void in my heart. And she kind of said some very surface stuff. And then he said, why are you smiling? She said, I just like looking at you. And it's like, I felt like that was when like his whole demeanor changed. There was this long pause. And then she said, you seem sad. And then it was, yeah. So continue with the synopsis.
Well, so then they like kind of like go off into that dark space, you know? And in that conversation, she kind of tells you like, I need you to like trust a relationship and to like not give up on us. And so this is really important because the next day when he goes to see her, he does say, you know, I just expressed that I love you, and then you didn't really respond, and then you suggested that I was giving up on you. And I think he's like, if you heard me say that I love you and that you feel a void in my like heart, like you would understand that I'm not giving up. I'm like, I just jumped in, you know? And so, but then it gets so messy, right? So she apologizes, but like that doesn't seem to be what he needs. And then she's like, well, I can't tell you that I'm not going to tell you that I love you, but I'm going to give you the rose. I'll tell you that. And he's like, that's not really what I asked for. And he's like, I'm also not asking you to tell me that you love me back.
It felt like one of those cartoons. Like, I don't know if you're like me, Danielle, or Bill, if you have kids, but when you watch little kid cartoons now, and you know from the first 5 minutes what's going to happen the next 45, and it is like cringeworthy to sit and watch it play out because you see it like he's behind door number 2. Like you just know whatever the answer is. And I feel like that happened over and over and over with they're just miscommunicating after that turning point. And in the dark space, I think it's important to note I don't know if y'all felt it, but the way that she was talking felt like they had this secret pact that like, I'm going to choose you. You just have to like play the game.
Yeah.
And then he's like, I'm done playing the game. I don't want a rose. I want you to tell America and tell me that you love me. Oh, it was painful. I have like full body response to this right now because it just was so cringeworthy.
Well, I think that I feel like I've been in an argument where I've been Greg before, though, like where, you know, I'm like, I want you to say I'm sorry, and then like they're like, I'm so sorry, I really am sorry, and I'm like, but I wanted you to say it yesterday, you know, and like you like want this thing, and they're like doing it, but like what you really wanted was them to get it right the first time, and it's like but you can't rewind time. So what I find really interesting about this has been so divided in response on Twitter, and I've been like thinking about this a lot. So there have been a lot of accusations that so Katie kind of insinuated with her Twitter that she was gaslighted by Greg. Lots of people were like calling him out for gaslighting her.
Friend of the show, Connie Hansen was not impressed with him. I got a 11:45 p.m. text from Connie.
Yeah, so like a lot of people, I mean, I would say that I was frustrated and a little bit disappointed in him, but like people were also like coming out and like saying that he was abusive. And so I want to kind of talk a little bit about what gaslighting is, and because I've been struggling with this, and I would like to kind of ask you all to help me, like to talk through, like, do we think that what was happening was in fact gaslighting? And, you know, Bill, as you're someone who studies this too, you know, what's the difference between an unhealthy conversation and an abusive conversation? Where, you know, how do we recognize that line? I should also use this as a content warning. I'm jumping into all of this. So if this is something that's hard for you to engage, you might want to fast forward a bit or visit us again next week. My understanding of gaslighting is, one, the term is kind of an interesting term that comes from a movie. I can't remember the name of it, but it's an older movie where a man, and I don't know if it was his wife or his girlfriend, put in these light bulbs that would flicker, and he was trying to make her think that she was crazy. And so she'd be like, the lights are flickering, and he'd be like, no, they're not, the lights are fine, and like staged all this thing to basically make her think that she was going nuts because these lights, he wasn't seeing the lights flicker and she was. And so that's where the concept of gaslighting actually comes from, is like from this movie. The term gaslighting, I'm gonna like get it, the dictionary definition of this.
So as you're looking it up, the movie was called Gaslight. It was from a play, and then it was turned into a movie.
Cool. See, you got all the facts.
I got the
So Katie actually took the definition of gaslighting, and I think has it on one of her pages, but it's an insidious form of manipulation and psychological control. Do you all have like the whole definition? There's like a
Katie G. She was reading the dictionary when we came on.
I was, but it's not in there because it's an old dictionary, but I'll bring it up.
So like basically it is so it really is kind of, I think like that movie gives a good example. It's emotional or psychological manipulation. And the whole point is you don't really want someone to know that you're kind of like trying to control them.
I got one.
Sorry, I was going to say the National Domestic Violence Hotline offers some different forms of gaslighting so you can withhold. So sometimes you say, I don't want to hear this again. You might counter, you might say, you're wrong. That's not what really happened. You might block or divert. You might say, that's just a crazy idea that you had, or you're imagining things. Trivializing is where you're like, oh, that wasn't that big of a deal, or you make a joke out of something that is serious. And you might also forget or denial. Oh, you're just making this stuff up. So one of my worst examples where I have experienced gaslighting is there was a really big conflict situation, and like we had to like record it, write it down. And a couple of months later, I like said something to my supervisor at the time, right? Oh, this happened. And they were like, I don't remember any of that happening. So like, that's like one of my most insidious, is where like, I was just told like, oh, like that never happened. I'm like, I have pages of records of this. So Bill, you said that you found like a definition. Do you want to share it?
You covered it pretty well. Essentially, it is giving false information to make somebody think something is happening that is not. You can either do it by withholding information, creating situations that make them question what reality is, things like that.
So based off of those definitions, like, do we think that gaslighting happened?
I personally think that from the definition, and obviously I think that you have to see more of someone's like gaslighting can take place over time, and it's this like small chipping away at someone's reality or truth. So that way it's it's a constant manipulation, and usually like an agenda or game to control them. I don't feel like he is someone who gaslights. I feel like there were moments in that argument where he did diminish what she was saying, or just blatantly cut her off and kind of ask in a different way, or he already had his mind made up, and then no matter what she said, he was kind of twisting it back to what he already perceived the reality to be and to leave. So it'd be interesting to see more play out. It definitely, for me, who's experienced gaslighting, a red flag of just like, I noticed those tendencies. I don't know that that is your all the time, but I'm going to note that that happened. And I think that when something is like this, and even other reality shows that people watch, I think we're quick to be like, they're this, and then just label them as that, instead of working through it. But I oftentimes also feel like someone who gaslights sometimes can have narcissistic tendencies, because they want their truth, their message, their whatever to be pivotal or more important. And I think it really all stemmed from miscommunication. I do feel like there were some gaslighting moments in that last and final kind of argument that they had. But I wouldn't jump to say that it was abusive or abuse. And maybe not even unhealthy conversation. It was just very unproductive. Like they constantly were missing the mark. I don't know that it even was really unhealthy. To come back to it, they could both be like, I admit that I wasn't even really listening. I was listening to respond, not listening to hear.
What do you think, Bill?
I was basically going to say a lot of what Katie said, which is that I don't think he was actively, and sometimes I think that's the problem when a word gets put into the like public consciousness and people start using it, is that it loses what the actual meaning is. And so I think he was doing things that are like behaviors of somebody who gaslights, but I feel like you have to have the intent behind it to actually be gaslighting somebody. And I think we've all been in arguments where we say something and it's like, given time, an ample amount of like clarity, we would not have said that, and we feel really bad about it. And so probably, like Katie said, you'd probably have to watch for the pattern of behavior. But I do think there were times where he wasn't fighting what, as a relationship scientist, I would call fair, unproductive fighting. And so what you were saying, I don't know if it was abusive, but it certainly, there was a point where I would be like, hey, if you guys want to continue as a couple, probably now's the time to take a time out, really think about what you want from this relationship, come back with, what are your things you have to get out of this relationship, and what are the things that you will not tolerate from your partner, or you're just going to continue to do this pattern of arguing. And that's probably the bigger thing for a relationship, right? Is that, you
need to know how to fight.
Yeah, you're going to get in arguments, and they are emotionally charged, and you are going to go back to, what did they say? You don't rise to the occasion, you sink to your level of preparation. It's like, you're going to go back to the argument style that works best. And so I was paying attention, but I was flipping through one of my books here, and this is a chart we use, and it kind of has, when you're in conflict, how does it go? And it's like, you initiate the event, you either engage or avoid, then it escalates, you either negotiate or separate or reconcile, and then it kind of goes to a loop, and you have some outcomes, and one's like a structural improvement, one's an integrative agreement, one's a compromise, or you can have domination or separation. And so I kind of think, at one point there, that's kind of what Greg tried to do, is he tried to walk off, and Katie tracked him down in that labyrinth of a hotel that twice now she's walked out and been like where, and then, she like engaged him, and I felt like that was where he separated, I'm done, I'm out, and he walked off.
But even finally walking off, like, to me, his heart was like, he wanted to set boundaries with what I perceive as an outsider to be part of the show of, I'm done navigating this space where you're dating multiples, and I can't handle that anymore. And whether or not that boundary could be respected by Katie, and then it just miscommunicated several times over, and even him wanting to leave, but then because he didn't want to leave, and but I can't stay, because it was all just so heightened. And I even felt like, and I'm surprised it didn't happen, like when they do scream at the cameras and be like, get out of my face, like I just need space. And then Caitlin kind of swooping in to be a participant in this, and having experienced it, to de-escalate Katie back to a point where they can film, they can capture what's happening, but also keep things going, or figure out, behind the scenes, they have to be like, well, if Katie wants to go home, are we going to send her home? Are we going to send a film crew home? Like, what happens?
Right.
Yeah.
And Danielle, did you want to add anything about the gaslighting?
Well, I think like that's what I was struggling, because like anytime that there's accusations of like gaslighting or abuse, like I want to listen and try to like understand and see it from that perspective, and take that sort of claim, those sorts of claims seriously. And especially if like Katie was sort of insinuating by that's what she experienced. But I think I sort of struggled, because I was like, one, I don't know that was his intention. And two, I think it gets to, there's kind of this fine line too, between sometimes people have different perceptions of what happened, and trying to persuade each other to see each other's perspectives is different than gaslighting. And I think that in our public conversations of gaslighting, I do think we want to be careful, because if you are experiencing it, it's not cool at all. And I think calling anything gaslighting, it loses sort of its charge, it loses what it does if we start applying it to things that maybe it isn't. And I think, Katie, one of the things that you pointed out that I've been like thinking about a lot too is, this seems like a really emotionally intense situation, and they're probably not sleeping very well. Like, this is not their best selves, and like that's not permission to like treat each other like crap. But like, I get worried when we like essentialize a person. Oh, this person's identity is this thing based off of one moment. I really truly believe that humans are bigger than the worst decision they've ever made, than the being a bad fighter in a fight, right? I think that we are often more complex and complicated than that, but we're also accountable for ourselves, even in those worst moments. And so how do we hold people accountable and say, hey, there are some things you were doing in this conversation that were red flags that if you continue on aren't healthy, and you're accountable for that. But like, also that doesn't make you a gaslighting abuser, right? Like there's an in between there, you know, like, and I think that like, if we could learn to maybe talk about that a little bit more nuanced in public conversations of things, that it would probably be better for all of us.
I think that is huge. And I too am like, I want to be whoever is stating something abuse related or gaslighting or whatever, to take those claims very seriously, especially with the Me Too movement. What has come to the surface in our public rhetoric of sexual abuse, and that being more talked about and also disclosed that this is not okay. I think that this really brings to light, in a messy way, I'm sure, in our public rhetoric and platforms like Twitter and Instagram and whatever else, that sometimes we might, as a public, mess it up while we're trying to decipher. These are words that some people have never even heard of, and to experience and be like, wait a second, we also saw this on camera, both sides, as to what we know, watching this play out and getting to then apply a definition to that experience. And I hope that we shift towards, instead of just labeling everything, that we shift towards a spectrum of those can be behaviors or tendencies, but it doesn't make that person a gaslighter or a gaslighting abuser. And we're very quick to just label that as an identity instead of a characteristic or a circumstance or a whatever that's, you know, was it a moment. And I think that that's a beautiful example right now, where we're getting to, in a very messy way, same with like Black Lives Matter, have to discuss it, like have to figure out what that really means and how does it apply and how do we go from there, you know, in a public format.
Absolutely.
I think that's why it's important for couples who are having issues to go to like a relationship therapist. I mean, you got to have the space to disagree. And like, if every time someone disagrees with you, and I'm not saying this is what Katie did, because also we saw 20 minutes of that argument. I guarantee that argument was 3 hours long, like any good argument. But I think that I think that if you tell your partner every time they disagree with you that they're gaslighting you, you're not going to have a successful relationship. And so there needs to be boundaries and kind of ways that you can safely disagree with each other, where both people feel like their thoughts are put out there. And there's times when a partner's going to say something, you're going to be like, that's just not true. And that's not right. And you need to be able to say that, or it's going to breed resentment. So
yeah, like an accusation is an ultimatum, and
right.
kind of shifting away from that as like this ebb and flow, like this natural flow of life, that there will be moments where we're at our best and there will be moments where we're not. And then we take accountability and kind of move on from that. And I think we're seeing in our society where we shift from the accountability and then what, because we don't know what the then what looks like. We're not shown it in TV and movies and really anything.
Well,
so I hope that they take that as an opportunity.
I think we struggle to understand what accountability can look like without making it somebody's identity. And I think like that's, you know, that's kind of hard. Like how do you say, hey, I am setting this boundary, I'm calling this action out, but like, I'm not saying this is who you are all the time, but like also get it together, bud. So I don't know. So it leaves really messy. We're like, is Katie going home? Like, are they over forever? Maybe she goes back, it kind of looks like. What are your predictions?
I don't have a good prediction other than I don't see any way. I would not feel comfortable if I was one of the two other guys at this point. Like, if she had not explained the situation to me, we would be watching it and I'd be like, whoa, like this is not okay. Like, you know.
See, like, I think that I just like have this feeling that she's going to go back to the other guys or Blake, and there's going to be pressure for a proposal, and there's like no way that's happening.
I I definitely could see that playing out, especially if Greg is very like draws a firm line and is at no part a part of reconciliation whatsoever. In my heart and feels in my gut, I'm like, it's Katie and Greg, and they have this pact. They're just working through some stuff. It's in this hyper tense time frame that they're trying to put it all together. And I do feel like she's kind of stringing along the other guys, even though she does really care about them. And I'm glad that she said it in that bathroom kind of crying session of, how do you expect to continue with like a proposal and a healthy relationship when also you are grieving a major heartbreak, you know, like this really intimate relationship that comes to an end, and then 2 hours later you're supposed to be on this happy-go-lucky.
I think we see Greg again. Do you think we see Greg again?
I think without a doubt I think you have to. It's like, how can you have a movie with like the main person dies? Although I guess
in your vision of this, Greg is the main character. This is interesting. Yeah, wow.
But just the way that she talked when they had this like secret, let's go into the next room, and like whispering, like it just felt like they had this like, which I know they're mic'd, so I guess maybe this could be difficult, but I feel like they had a pact, like, let's make it to the end. And in true Bachelor Nation, there was a blow up, someone walks out, Katie goes home. Like, I've seen it 20 seasons in a row. And the only reason I state that is because when Greg is kind of like looking around, when he was sitting on the bench and Katie followed him, it almost felt like she was reluctantly having to chase. And two, he was like looking over his shoulder and sits down on a bench and like waits for her to chase him. Like, it just felt kind of staged. And then, well, I gotta storm off now. And then she decides to leave. I don't know. It just felt calculated. And I'm hoping that I hope that they love each other in me. I don't know. I mean,
Katie, you like the love too. Got your girlfriend.
My heart of hearts with my love flower shirt. Here's a rose, Katie. Like,
so what are our lessons learned? What did we learn? What's your takeaways?
If you're going to argue, make sure you know what you're arguing about, because I don't think they had any clue what they were arguing about. And an argument about nothing never ends up well. That was a double negative. No bad argument never worked out good. Never.
I think even just like the opening conversation on a public platform of gaslighting, what it really means, how you can have those examples shown, but not be like this whole abusive maybe relationship. And that does not discredit any person who has experienced gaslighting and is in an abusive relationship, because it is very difficult. It can be very scary, especially if they had experienced it before. And that's re-triggering to Katie. Who knows? I don't know if she said. But also, I had stated this in kind of the notes, but something that I really try to center myself with, especially in our society today, is presence over presenting, because we are given a lot of ways to present ourselves now on different platforms. You could be different people on different platforms. You show your best self to the people you're around. And I think that happened a lot in this episode, and would be difficult to like reground and center yourself and be authentic and vulnerable when it feels scary. And let's be real, half of you are going to get your heart broken. So it is scary. And hoping that in this finale that you do see the authentic self come forward, and whatever that means, what's best for all of them.
So I'm going to go with learn your definitions. I
Get a
dictionary. My kids just got home from the pool, so we might hear them in the background. But Katie, any shout outs, last words?
Just to repeat that you can find me on Instagram at coached by KG or Les Travel, LEZTRVL. I love this kind of stuff. I find it fascinating to study human behavior, especially in an emotional container like this. It is just like, we're humans. And then we get to watch the messy. It's fascinating.
Yay. Thank you so much, Katie.
No, thank you. Had a blast.
Thanks, Katie.
Next week.
Next week. You've been listening to Batchademia with your hosts, Doctors Daniel Dick McGew and Bill Henniger. All opinions expressed on this show are solely the opinion of the person who spoke them. If you like our podcast, please consider following us, leaving us a 5-star rating, and a positive review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, please share with your friends, family, and other ardent Bachelor content lovers. If you have comments or questions you would like us to address on the show, you can email us at batchademia@gmail.com or on the Twitter with the handle @batchademia. Thanks for listening.